Good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 16 and we will be reporting past 28, investment in associate and joint venture. So before we start, let me introduce to you the presenters. Miss Irish V. Alo, Miss Casey Lucy Castillo, Miss Anarica A. Mayo, Miss Carmay M. Tenorio, and yours truly, ROMARIE D. CAYABYAB. The main objectives of PAS 28 prescribes accounting for investment in associate and to set out the requirements for the application of the equity method when accounting for investment in associate and joint ventures. So nabanggit dito ang joint venture. So joint venture is dealt with PFRS 11. It defines joint arrangement including joint ventures and it states that you should apply equity method. So here in PAS 28, the same equity method is described for both associate and joint venture. Next, for the scope of PAS 28, this standard will be applied to all entities that are investors with joint control of or significant influence over an investee. So, dalawa lang yan kapag joint control sa joint venture and kapag significant influence naman sa investment in associate. So, take note, this does not apply to investment in associate held by venture capital organization, a mutual fund, a unit trust, and a similar entity, including investment-linked insurance funds kasi lahat sila ay to be governed by PFRS 9, financial instruments. So, we will discuss some key definitions from PAS 28. First is the associate. It is an entity over which the investor has significant influence. Here, we are the investors. And kapag may significant influence ka over another entity, that entity is your associate. So, what is significant influence then? Take note, this is the power to participate in the financial and operating policy decisions of the investee, but is not control or joint control of those policies. Kasi if you can control the entity, then you are in a parent-subsidiary relationship. There is a different accounting and a different standard. Joint control, that is joint venture. So, significant influence, you only have the power to participate in the financial and operating policy decision of the investee. Mamaya, we will further discuss that. Next, we will talk about the equity method. This is a method of accounting whereby the investment is initially recognized at cost and adjusted thereafter for the post-acquisition change in the investor's share of investee's net asset. So, we will be talking about the equity method later on. So, next is joint arrangement. It is an arrangement of which two or more parties have joint control. It is the contractually agreed sharing of control of arrangement. So decisions here require the unanimous consent of the parties sharing control. And next is joint venture. It is a joint arrangement whereby the parties that have joint control of the arrangement have the rights to the net asset of the arrangement. And last, joint venturer. It is a party to a joint venture that has joint control of that joint venture. So this will be further elaborated by the next group. Next, we'll be talking about significant influence. For significant influence, we have what we call quantitative presumption. So again, this is only a presumption. So number one, if you hold directly or indirectly 20% or more of the voting power of the investee, it is presumed that the investor has significant influence unless it can be clearly demonstrated that this is not the case. So kapag ang iyong investment ay 20% pataas, ang assumption is associate mo siya unless it is clear na wala kang significant influence. So again, this is an only presumption. Also, if your holding is less than 20%, kunwari 19 or 18%, the investor will be presumed not to have significant influence unless mapapakita na mayroon siyang significant influence. So, this is just the presumption. What will override is yung mga qualitative indicators. So, kahit for example, less than 20% yung ating holding, pwedeng may significant influence pa din. And even though over 20%, kunwari 20 or 30%, it doesn't mean na automatically may significant influence. Sometimes wala pa din because of the qualitative indicators. So what are these indicators? So PAS 28 under paragraph 6 provides the evidence of significant influence existence even if the ownership is less than 20%. So letter A, representation of the board of directors or equivalent governing body of the investee. Meaning, part ng board of directors ni investee, si investor. Letter B, participation in policy-making processes, including participation in decisions about dividends or other distribution. Of course, since part ng board of directors si investor, kailangan din na may participation siya sa policy making processes. Letter C, material transactions between the entity and its investee. When we say material transaction, ang mga transaction between investor and investee ay mga large amount. And then letter D, interchange of managerial personnel. Ibig sabihin, nagpapalitan ng tauhan si investor at si investee. And then last, provision of essential technical information. So, yung information, syempre, alam natin na when it comes to business, it is confidential. So, hindi yan pinamimigay basta-basta. And kapag may access ka to that confidential information, probably you have significant influence. So, kapag may power ka o isa sa limang yan, or most of this, then that means mayroon kang significant influence. So, again, the qualitative indicators override the quantitative presumptions. So, under paragraph 9, an entity loses significant influence over an investee when it loses power to participate in the financial and operating policy decision of the investee. The loss of significant influence can occur with or without a change in absolute or relative ownership levels. Again, ang significant influence is the power to participate. And if you will lose that power to participate, it simply means you will lose significant influence over the investee. So, ang sabi doon sa last statement or last paragraph, the loss of significant influence can occur with or without a change in ownership levels. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin lang nun, for example, meron kang 30% of ownership, pwede mo pa rin mawala yung significant influence kung wala ka ng power to participate or hindi mo na i-exercise yung power to participate mo. So, pagka ganun, pwede mong masabi na nawala yung significant influence mo even without a change of a percentage in your ownership. If mapapansin nyo, kanina pa nababanggit yung voting power or yung voting rights. So, ano nga ba yun? So, for significant influence to exist, the investment should provide the investors voting rights. Thus, the investment in preference shares, regardless of the percentage of the ownership, is not accounted under PAS 28 because preference shares do not give investors voting rights. So, ang ownership daw natin must include voting rights. So, ano nga ba itong ownership na may voting rights? Ito yung mga ordinary shares. So, syempre, we already know that we have two classes of shares. It is the ordinary share and then the preference shares. And between the two, only the ordinary share has the voting rights. So, bakit ordinary shares lang at hindi preference shares? Syempre, alam naman natin na sa corporation, ang decision-making or policy-making is dependent on votes. So, paramihan ng votes. Yung mga owners na may voting rights, sila lang yung maaaring magbigay ng vote, which means they are the only one allowed to participate in the policy making, which is yung mga ordinary shareholders. So it means yung mga preference shareholders, normally non-voting shareholders sila, hindi sila kasali sa management ng corporation. Bakit? Kasi nga, they are already the preference shares. Madami na silang natatanggap na benefit compared to the ordinary shareholders. Kaya bakit pa sila bibigyan ng boses sa management ng corporation? Samantalang sila yung nauuna when it comes to the dividend distribution and asset distribution. So, between the preference shareholder and ordinary shareholder, mas may concern si ordinary shareholder sa management ng entity. Kasi ang interest lang na natatanggap ng shareholders ay residual. Kung ano lang yung matitira after mabigyan ni preference share, yun yung paghahatian ng mga ordinary shareholders. Kaya ang may power is, kaya ang may voting rights is si ordinary shareholder. And sabi din dito, potential voting rights. So ano nga ba itong potential voting rights? Ito daw yung mga debt or equity instruments that are convertible into ordinary shares that are currently exercisable and convertible. Again, pag sinabing potential voting rights, ang mga ito ay hindi pa talaga ordinary shares. Kaya as of this moment, potential pa lang. Hindi pa talaga sila ordinary shares. Pero pwede silang maging ordinary shares once the instrument has been exercised or converted to ordinary shares. And sabi dito, it is accounted under PFRS 9. So next slide. So here is a case or an example of the ownership. So sa case 1, on January 1, 20X1, Hive Company acquired 30,000 shares of Pledis Incorporations. So 100,000 outstanding shares at 10 pesos per share. So ang required dito is to compute for the percentage of the ownership acquired. So para ma-solve natin yon, we will just divide the number of shares acquired sa outstanding shares. So meron tayong in-acquired na 30,000 divided by 100. So we have 30% of the ownership interest. And then next is case 2. On January 1, 20X1, Hive Company acquired 30,000 newly issued shares of Pledis Incorporations at 10 pesos per share. Before the acquisition, Pledis had 100,000 ordinary shares outstanding. So ang requirement din daw dito is the percentage of ownership acquired. So katulad lang kanina, i-divide natin yung shares acquired sa outstanding shares after acquisition naman dito. So yung after acquisition, yung 100,000 and then yung 30,000 in-acquired natin is mag-a-add natin. So 30,000 yung in-acquired natin divide by 130,000 equals 23.08%. Yun na yung ownership interest natin. So ngayon, let us proceed to the equity method. So under PAS 28, ito daw yung accounting for investment in associate and joint venture. So yung accounting treatment na gagamitin natin sa ating investment ay tinatawag na equity method. At under equity method, ang concept daw behind this accounting treatment is that the investor and the investee are viewed as single economic entity. Ibig sabihin nito, the investor and the investee are one and the same. Again, investment in associate are accounted using the equity method. Iisang method lang yung gagamitin natin sa investment in associate, which is yung equity method. Also, ito din yung gagamitin nating method for joint venture. So, wag natin kakalimutan na kasama yan dito. Although sa PFRS 11 siya madidiscuss. Pag sinabi nating equity method, kinokopya ni investor yung nagiging effect doon sa shareholders equity ni investee sa investment account niya. So let's say na nag-increase ang shareholders equity ni investee, so anong nagiging effect nito sa investment account ni investors? So syempre, nag-i-increase din yung investment in associate. So kapag nabawasan naman ang shareholders equity ni investee, di mababawasan din yung investment in associate. So, yun lang yung sa equity method. So, what are the accounting procedures? So, letter A, the investment is initially recognized at cost. So, kung magkano mo binili, yun yung i-record mo. So, after you record or initially recognize the investment, punta na tayo sa letter B. So, letter B, the carrying amount is increased by the investors' share of profit of the investee and decreased by the share of loss of the investee. So, ito nga, bakit gumagalaw? Kasi nga, kinokopya lang natin yung effect ng shareholders equity ni investee sa investment account ni investor. So, kapag may increase sa share in profit ni investee, mag-i-increase din yung carrying amount of investment natin. And kapag may loss or other comprehensive loss, magdi-decrease naman yung carrying amount ng investment. And then, the investor share of profit or loss of the investee is recorded as investment in income. So, letter C, distribution or dividend received from an equity investee reduce the carrying amount. Ibig sabihin pala, kapag si investee or si associate mo is nag-declare ng dividend sa'yo, ibig sabihin, makaka-receive ka. Pero hindi mo yun i-treat as dividend income. Ang magiging treatment mo sa kanya ay return in investment. Kaya sabi nga dito, distribution or dividends received from an equity investee reduce the carrying amount. Nabawasan yung value ng investment. So, hindi lang pala siya So, hindi lang pala sa losses mababawasan ang value ng investment in associate. Take note, mababawasan din siya kapag nagkaroon ng distribution or dividend received. So, letter D. Note that the investment must be in ordinary shares. So, sa problem, titignan mo dapat na sabihin doon is ordinary share. Kung hindi naman siya i-mention or silent yung problem, ang assumption ay ordinary share siya. Pero pag sinabing preference share, ang sabi dito under equity method, it is not appropriate regardless of the percentage because sa siyang non-voting entity. It is because madami siyang benefits na natatanggap. So letter E, technically, the investor has significant influence over the investee. The investee is said to be an associate. So, accordingly, under the equity method, the investment in ordinary shares should be appropriately described as investment in associate. Ang gusto lang nito sabihin, sa financial statements ay may sarili siyang line items. Hindi mo siya pwede isama doon sa short-term investment. Actually, itong investment in associate ay non-current asset. Isa siyang financial asset pero siya ay non-current at hindi siya cover ng PFRS 9. Siya ay cover ng PAS 28 which is different treatment. So, ayun, letter F, non-current asset. So, here is how we compute the carrying amount of the investment in associate in the year end. So, may dalawa tayong method. First is yung direct computation. So, dito sa direct computation, yung beginning balance, i-add natin doon yung share in profit. And then, kapag may share in loss tayo, i-less natin. And then, kapag may share in other comprehensive income tayo, i-add din natin. And then, kapag may share in other comprehensive loss tayo, i-less din natin. And then, lastly is yung dividends received is i-less din natin. So, kapag tinutal natin yun, makukompute natin yung investment in associate and or yung carrying amount. And so, yung another method is pwede natin siyang i-T account kung saan tayo mas sanay. So, ito yung illustration ng T account. So, ayun. Alam niyo naman na kung saan yung debit or credit. So, let's now go to the illustration. So, number 1. On January 1, 2019, an investor purchased 20,000 shares of the 100,000 outstanding shares of another entity at 200 pesos per share. The investment represents 20% equity interest and the investor has significant influence over the investee. The acquisition cost is equal to the carrying amount of the asset acquired. So, ikaw na investor, bumili ka daw ng 20,000 shares out of 100,000 outstanding shares na binibenta ni investee. So, sabi dito, meron ka daw 20%. So, meron kang 20% na equity interest and magkano mo binili yung shares? Binili mo siya per 200 pesos per share. So, malinaw na sinabi dito sa problem na meron kang significant influence and then meron ka ding 20%. So, pwede nating i-compute yung 20% na equity interest. So, paano? 20,000 shares divide by 100,000 shares. Yun yung computation para makuha yung 20%. So, ang entry natin dito to recognize the initial measurement or initial cost is debit to investment in associate na 4 million and credit to cash na 4 million. Paano nakuha yung 4 million? 20,000 shares multiplied by 200 pesos per share. Kaya nakuha yung 4 million. So, dahil tapos na nating i-entry or i-recognize yung initial measurement, punta na tayo sa subsequent measurement. So, number 2, the investee reported net income of 5 million for 2019. The investor recognized a share of net income of the investee equal to 20% of 5 million or 1 million. So, tanong dito, so sabi dito, kumita daw si investee mo ng 5 million. So, ang tanong, meron ka bang equity interest dito or meron ka bang share dito? So, ang sagot is yes, kasi nga meron kang 20% na share. So, paano mo siya i-entry? So, debit to investment in associate na 1 million and then credit to share in profit of associate na 1 million. Paano nakuha yung 1 million ulit? 20% times 5 million. So, yun. So, dito, nag-increase yung value ng investment in associate mo kasi nag-earn yung investee mo. Number 3, receive a 20% share dividend from the investee on December 31, 2019. So, naka-receive daw tayo ng 25% na share dividend. So, hindi cash dividend ang na-receive natin. So, sabi dito, memo entry siya. So, ang memo entry natin dito is receive 5,000 ordinary shares as 25% share dividends on 20,000 original shares. Share now held 25,000 shares. So, ang tanong dito is, tumaas kaya yung share natin? So, ang sagot is no. So, yung share natin still stays to 20%. Kasi nga walang effect yung share dividends sa equity interest natin. So, equity interest is the same before and after the share dividends. So, number 4. The net investee reported a net loss of 1 million for 2020. The investor recognized a share in the net loss of the investee equal to 20% of 1 million for 200,000. So, under equity method, bumaba yung equity ni associate. So, magdi-decrease din yung investment in associate ni investor. So, ang entry dito is debit to share in loss of associate, credit to investment in associate na 200,000. Naka-credit yung investment in associate kasi nga mababawasan or magdi-decrease yung investment in associate ni investor since kung ano nga yung mangyayari or gagalaw sa equity ni investee, yun din yung mangyayari or effect sa investment in associate ni investor. So, number 5, the investee declared and paid a cash dividend of 2,500,000 on ordinary shares on December 31, 2020. The investor recognized a share in cash dividends paid on the investee equal to 20% for 2,500,000 for 500 or 500,000. So, naka-receive ka ng cash dividends. So, debit to cash na 500,000, credit to investment in associate na 500,000. Note that under equity method, cash dividend is not an income but a return or reduction of investment. So, pakitandaan sa equity method, ang galaw ng equity ni investee or ni associate ay siya ding galaw ng investment ni investor. Kung bumaba yung equity, bababa din yung value ng investment and vice versa. And kailangan nga lang alam mo kung kailan tataas or bababa ang equity ni investee. So, ayun lang po yung sa part ko. Sana naintindihan nyo. So, next reporter is Miss Irish Alo for the application of equity method.
So, thank you, Ms. KAYABYAB. So, good afternoon po once again. So, we will discuss further about the equity method, the application of equity method. So, at this point, may tatakal po natin about on when we should start applying the equity method and kung paano natin i-account yung difference whenever si investor pays more or less for the investment than the carrying amount of underlying net assets. So, let's proceed. So an investor starts using the equity method as from the date when it obtains significant influence over an investee. So from the date or from the time na si entity or si investor ay nakapag-obtain or na-assess niya na or na-determine niya na meron siyang significant influence over an another entity or kay investee, si investor can start applying the equity method. So for example, sa sample illustration kanina ni Ms. KAYABYAB na noong January 1, 2019 daw, si investor ay nag-purchase ng 20,000 shares out of 100,000 outstanding ordinary shares ni investee. Basically, it represents 20% equity interest. So, si investor ay may 20% ownership interest kay investee. So, we can assume na meron na siyang significant influence kasi based dun sa discussion kanina ni Ms. KAYABYAB na kapag 20% na daw to 50% na yung ownership interest mo kay investee, meron ka ng significant influence unless it is clearly stated na hindi yun yung case or hindi yun yung magiging basis natin in determining kung meron nga ba tayong significant influence or wala. So from that time on, January 1, 2019, si investor can start applying the equity method. Or yung magiging accounting treatment niya na for its investment is by using equity method. So ano nga ba yung equity method? So the concept behind this equity method is that si investor daw and si investee are viewed as single economic entity. Meaning, si investor and si investee are one and the same. So anong ginagawa natin under this equity method? So under this equity method, ina-adjust natin yung ating investment in associate na account based dun sa changes sa equity ni investee. For example, nag-increase yung equity ni associate or ni investee. Of course, i-increase din natin yung ating investment in associate na account. Kung may decrease dun sa equity ni associate or ni investee, of course, dapat may corresponding decrease din sa ating investment in associate na account. Kumbaga, ginagaya natin kung ano yung changes or movement sa equity ni investee. So, but hindi yung whole changes or yung buong changes dun sa equity ni investee ang gagayahin natin sa ating libro, but only up to the extent of our share. For example, there is a 1 million increase sa equity ni investee or ni associate. Tapos we have 20% shares sa company nila. So only the 20% nung 1 million, which is equivalent to 200,000 na increase doon sa equity ni investee ang gagayahin natin or ang ire-record natin or ang i-increase din natin sa ating investment in associate na account. So yun po yung equity method. So on acquisition of the investment, any difference between the cost of the investment and the entity's share of the net fair value of the investee's identifiable assets and liabilities is accounted for as follows. A, if cost is greater than the fair value of the interest acquired, the excess is goodwill. B, if cost is less than the fair value of the interest acquired, the excess is included as income in the determination of the investor's share of the associate's profit or loss in the period of acquisition. So dito tayo. So when we say cost of the investment, ito yung binayad natin or the consideration we paid in acquiring ownership sa company. And also, it includes transaction cost. So in case na may transaction cost sa ating mga problem, included siya as the cost of our investment. And when we say identifiable assets and liabilities, identifiable assets, it includes tangible and intangible assets. Under intangible assets, hindi kasama doon yung goodwill. So itong identifiable assets and liabilities daw ni investee should be measured at fair value. So anong pinapagawa nito, itong sentence na to? So pinapagawa niya is that pag-compare daw natin yung ating binayad or the cost of our investment and yung ating share lamang sa fair value nung identifiable assets and liabilities ni investee. So, pag napag-compare na natin, na-determine na din natin yung difference niya. Yung difference niya is i-account natin for as follows. So, A, if cost is greater than the fair value of the interest acquired, the excess is goodwill. So, if yung cost daw or yung binayad natin is mas mataas compared dun sa fair value of the interest acquired. So, ano nga ba yung interest acquired? So, nag-acquire tayo ng ownership sa company, right? Tapos, kung may ownership tayo sa company, of course, may ownership din tayo sa kanilang identifiable net assets. So, yun yung tinutukoy nating interest acquired. But yung particular ang tinutukoy lang natin dito is yung share natin doon sa identifiable assets and liabilities ni investee. So, kung mas mataas daw yung cost of our investment compared doon sa fair value doon sa share natin sa identifiable assets and liabilities, the excess is goodwill. Yung excess daw po is attributable to goodwill. Letter B, if yung cost is less than the fair value of the interest acquired, the excess is included as income in the determination of the investor's share of the associate's profit or loss in the period of acquisition. So, if yung cost or yung binayad natin is less than the fair value of the interest acquired o dun sa share or dun sa fair value nung share natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee, yung excess is included natin siya as our income in the determination of the investor share. Investor share lamang po of the associate's profit or loss in the period of acquisition. So para mas lalo natin maintindihan, i-discuss po natin sila isa-isa and magsosolve din po tayo ng illustration. So wala po sana tayong problema if the cost of our investment is equal doon sa carrying amount nung interest na na-acquired natin or yung doon sa share ng doon sa share natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee. Tapos nung dinetermine natin yung fair value niya is also equal. For example, yung cost of our investment is 5 million. And then, yung share natin or yung carrying amount doon sa share natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee is also 5 million. Tapos nung dinetermine natin yung fair value nung identifiable net assets ni investee is equal din sa 5 million. So wala sana tayong problema kasi dapat ang lagi natin pinagko-compare is yung cost or yung binayad natin and yung fair value. Fair value nung share natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee. Kasi nga usually yung mga item of assets sa book ni investee is recorded at book value. Hindi pa siya naka-fair value. So, wala sana tayong problema pag ganun, pag equal yung cost or yung binayad natin dun sa fair value ng share natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee. Kasi, ang entry lang natin yun, we debit investment in associate na 5 million and we credit cash. But then, nagkakaroon tayo ng additional procedure na kailangan natin i-perform or nagkakaroon tayo ng subsequent adjustment sa ating investment if kung mas mataas yung binayad natin or mas mababa compared doon sa fair value ng interest na na-acquired natin. So, doon muna tayo sa if the cost is greater than the carrying amount of the interest acquired. So, meaning, yung binayad natin is mas mataas daw compared doon sa carrying amount. Carrying amount muna of the interest acquired o dun sa share natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee. So, kung ganun, kung mas mataas, of course, yung excess, so meron tayong excess of cost or yung binayad natin over the carrying amount. So, saan siya attributable? So, baka attributable siya sa undervaluation of investee's assets such as building, land, and inventory. Meaning, yung identifiable net assets ni investee hindi pa naka fair value. Undervalued pa siya. Or undervalued pa siya or mas mataas daw yung kanyang fair value compared to its book value. So baka dahil sa undervaluation ng assets ni investee such as the building, land, and inventory. So pag na-determine na natin yung amount na attributable sa undervaluation tapos may excess pa din, i-attribute na natin siya sa goodwill. So bakit nga ba tayo nagkakaroon ng goodwill? So nagkakaroon tayo ng goodwill dahil mayroon tayong tinatawag na positive attributes or may mga positive attributes daw si investee or yung dun sa company na pinag-investan natin. So ano yung mga positive attributes na yon? For example, may magandang reputation daw si investee. It has a established brand name, may good customer base siya, meron siyang good employee relations, or leading business siya sa industry nila. Yun yung mga tinutukoy natin na positive attribute or yung positive goodwill na meron si investee. So meaning, hindi lang yung identifiable net assets yung binili mo, but also partly parang binili mo din yung goodwill na meron si investee. So of course, alam naman natin kung may mga ganung positive attributes yung isang company, syempre may positive effect din siya sa kanilang sa value ng company. So yun, hindi lang yung identifiable net assets kumbaga yung binayaran mo, kundi yung kanilang goodwill. Kasi kumbaga makikinabang ka din dyan sa goodwill na meron si investee. So yun. So ulitin ko, whenever na ma-excess of cost or yung binayad natin over the carrying amount, baka dahil attributable siya sa undervaluation or hindi pa naka-undervalue or hindi pa naka-fair value, of which yung fair value is mas mataas compared sa kanyang book value. So baka dahil sa undervaluation ng assets ni investee such as the building, land, and inventory, tapos kung ma-excess pa din, after mong na-deduct yan, automatic ilalagay na natin siya sa goodwill. So pakitandaan po yan. So ito yung mga important bullet na kailangan nating or points na kailangan nating matandaan. So, una, if the assets of the associates are fairly valued, attribute the excess to goodwill, which is included in the carrying amount of the investment and not amortized. So, if yung assets daw ni associates ay naka-fairly valued na siya, i-attribute natin yung excess automatic sa goodwill. Sa goodwill na siya automatic, which is included in the carrying amount of the investment and not amortized, kasi alam naman natin na yung goodwill is hindi natin siya ina-account separately. However, yung entire investment in associate natin, including yung goodwill, is tested for impairment at the end of reporting period. So second, if the excess is attributable to undervaluation of depreciable asset, amortize it over the remaining life of depreciable asset. So kung yung excess daw is naka-attribute siya dahil sa undervaluation of depreciable assets, i-amortize natin yung excess na yon over the remaining life of the depreciable asset. So pakitandaan po, i-amortize natin yung excess na yon over the remaining life of the depreciable asset. So third, if the excess is attributable to the undervaluation of land, it is not amortized, of course, because it is non-depreciable. But yung amount is expense natin when the land is sold. So yung excess na attributable to the undervaluation of land, hindi natin siya i-amortize dahil non-depreciable daw siya. But we expense natin siya when the land is sold. I-expense natin siya. So hindi naman literally na expense account parang i-debit lang natin yung share in profit or loss of associate na account. So later on, may encounter din po natin yon. So expense lang natin siya pag nabenta yung land. So ganun din, if the excess is attributable to inventory, the amount is expensed when the inventory is already so ganun din sa inventory. I-expense natin yung amount or yung excess kapag si inventory is already sold na. So, o nga pala, itong tatlong pa lang ito, hindi yung kabuuan ang excess but only yung share natin doon sa excess. Yung share lamang po natin. So, pakitandaan po yan, itong apat. So, para mas lalo natin maintindihan, may pinrovide po akong sample illustration. So, on January 1, 2021, Baby Co. purchased 20% of the outstanding ordinary share of Sweetie Co. for 5 million. On the date of acquisition, the carrying amount of Sweetie Co. net assets were equal to their fair value except for a depreciable assets for which the fair value is 2 million greater than its carrying amount and has a remaining useful life of 5 years. Any remaining excess is attributable to goodwill. The carrying amount of Sweetie Company net assets was 20 million. So, nung January 1 daw, 2021, si Baby Co, nag-purchase daw siya ng 20% of the outstanding ordinary shares of Sweetie Co for 5 million. So, nag-purchase daw siya ng 20%. So, we can assume na meron na tayong significant influence. So, yung investment natin is makaklassified na as investment in associate. And na-purchase niya yun worth 5 million. On the date of acquisition, yung carrying amount daw ng net assets ni Sweetie Co were equal to their fair values except sa isang depreciable asset for which yung fair value daw niya is mas mataas ng 2 million compared to its carrying amount. And yung depreciable asset na daw yun has a remaining useful life of 5 years. Pakitandaan po yun, 5 years. Any remaining excess is attributable to goodwill. The carrying amount of Sweetie Company net assets was 20 million. So magkano nga ba yung excess of cost natin over carrying amount of the interest na na-acquired natin? So magkano yung acquisition cost natin? We have 5 million. So we have acquisition cost of 5 million. Magkano na yung carrying amount ng net assets ni Sweetie Company? We have 20 million. But only yung share lang natin yung i-compute natin for the determination dun sa excess. So 20 million ng carrying amount of identifiable net assets ni Sweetie Co times 20% na ating share. So 4 million lang yung share natin dun sa identifiable net assets ni investee. So magkano yung natin excess nung cost natin or yung binayad natin over dun sa carrying amount. So may 1 million na sobra tayong binayad sa ating investment. So saan attributable yung excess na 1 million? So 'di ba? Kanina meron tayong na-encounter na isang depreciable assets daw na isang depreciable asset ni investee na yung fair value niya is mas mataas doon ng 2 million compared to its fair value. So ita-times natin yung 2 million times 20% nung ating share. So yung share lang natin doon sa undervaluation nung depreciable assets na yon is 400,000. So meron pa din natitirang 600. So natin i-attribute yun. Saan natin i-attribute yung 600 na yon? Kasi isang item of assets lang naman yung naka-undervalued. So automatic yun sa goodwill. So may goodwill tayo na 600,000. So we have excess of cost over carrying amount of 1 million. So nagkaroon tayo ng 1 million na sobra sa ating cost of our investment dahil sa undervaluation ng depreciable asset and dahil sa goodwill. So yung journal entry natin to record the investment noong January 1, 2021 sa book ni Baby Company is that we debit investment in associate na 5 million and we credit cash. And yung journal entry naman natin to amortize the excess of cost attributable to the undervaluation of depreciable assets. Diba? Katulad nga doon sa second bullet na discuss natin kanina, na kapag yung excess is attributable sa undervaluation of ng isang depreciable asset, i-amortize natin yung excess. I-amortize natin yung excess over its remaining useful life. So magkano yon? So 400,000, di ba, yung share natin doon sa undervaluation ng depreciable asset. So i-divide natin siya sa 5 years. So we have 80,000. So we babawasan natin yung investment in associate account natin na 80,000. Bakit? Bakit nabawasan? Di ba sabi nga natin kanina na mag-a-adjust tayo sa ating investment in associate na account based doon sa changes sa equity ni investee. Ano nga ba yung changes na naganap doon sa equity ni investee? So, naka-undervalued yung kanyang depreciable assets or yung intangible assets. Or so for example, yung depreciable assets niya or the intangible assets are naka-undervalued siya. So meaning yung depreciation or amortization ng mga item na yun is also naka-undervalued. So naturally, magre-result siya sa overstatement ng net income ni investee. So, kung ire-record na nila ng tama yon, o di parang mas bababa yung income ni investee, pag-aayusin nila or ire-record na nila yung appropriate na amount. So, mababawasan yung net income niya, of course, kabawasan yun sa kanilang equity, kaya babawasan din natin yung investment in associate natin na account ng 80,000. So, yun po yun. And we debit share in profit of associate na 80,000 also. So, note, the excess of 600,000 yung kanina, attributable to goodwill, is included na siya sa carrying amount. Carrying amount nung investment in associate and is not accounted for separately. Hindi na natin siya i-account separately, but included na lang siya dun sa investment, sa carrying amount ng investment in associate natin na account. Meaning, the goodwill is neither amortized nor tested for impairment separately. However, sabi ko nga kanina na yung entire investment in associate natin, including dun yung goodwill, will be tested for impairment at the end of reporting period. So next, dun tayo sa pangalawa na if the cost is less than the fair value of the identifiable assets and liabilities acquired. So ito daw, if yung binayad natin or the cost of our investment is mas mababa compared dun sa net fair value of identifiable assets and liabilities na na-acquired natin. Di ba lagi natin dapat pag-comparein is the cost or yung binayad natin and yung fair value nung share natin doon sa identifiable net assets ni investee. So, sa madaling salita nito, parang nakamura tayo. Or mababa yung pagkakabili natin sa identifiable net assets ni investee. So, paano natin i-account yun? So, whenever na meron excess of net fair value over dun sa cost or sa binayad natin, i-include natin siya as income in the determination of investor share. Again, laging investor share, yung share lamang natin of the associate's profit or loss in the period of acquisition. So, kung may excess dun sa net fair value ng identifiable net assets investees sa ating binayad, yung excess is i-account natin or included natin as our income. But in the determination of our share only. So, pakitandaan po na income, i-account natin siya as our income. So, bakit nga ba nagkakaroon ng ganong instances na kung saan mababa yung pagkakabili natin sa interest na na-acquired natin? So, kung kanina may tinatawag tayong goodwill or positive goodwill, of course, meron din tayong tinatawag na negative goodwill. Kabaliktaran siya nung yung mga attributes kanina na nabanggit natin. So, meaning, may mga negative attributes. Baka may mga negative attributes si investee, such as hindi magandang reputation niya, or hindi maganda yung pag-aalaga niya sa employees niya, mga ganun, etc. Alam naman natin na kapag may negative attributes si company, of course, it also has a negative effect sa kanyang value. So, baka dahil sa negative goodwill na meron or sa negative attribute na meron si investee, kaya mababa yung pagkakabili natin sa interest na na-acquired natin. Or pwede din, meron din tayong tinatawag na rush acquisition kung saan si old shareholder is in need of fund. So, pag in need of fund siya, yung hawak niyang shares or yung hawak niyang ordinary share is that ibebenta niya na kahit sa mababang halaga kasi nga in need siya of funds. So, kahit mababa na yung halaga kahit sa mababang halaga na yung mapagbebentahan niya is ibebenta niya sa bagong shareholder. So, yun yung tinatawag nating rush acquisition. So, yun yung mga reason kung bakit minsan or kung bakit mas mababa yung bili natin or yung cost of our investment compared doon sa na-acquired natin na interest. So, paki-remember po ulit, yung excess nung fair value, nung interest na acquired natin over dun sa cost is i-account natin siya as our income. So, appropriate adjustment to the investor share of associates' profit or loss after acquisition are also made to account. For example, for depreciation of depreciable asset based on their fair value on the acquisition date. So, kung nakakaroon tayo ng appropriate ng subsequent adjustment sa ating investment in associate account, of course, i-adjust din natin yung ating share of profit or loss of associate na account din natin. So, at the date of for the depreciation of depreciable asset based on their fair value on the date of acquisition. So, mag-answer tayo ng illustration para mas maintindihan natin. So, at the beginning of the year, Bogart Batumbakal Company purchased 40% of the ordinary shares outstanding of Jogras de Magiba Company for 15 million, when the net assets of Jogras de Magiba amounted to 30 million. At the acquisition date, the carrying amounts of the identifiable assets and liabilities of Jogras de Magiba Company were equal to their fair value, except for the following. A. Equipment whose fair value was 7 million greater than carrying amount, and B, inventory whose fair value was 2,500,000 pesos greater than carrying amount. The equipment has a remaining life of 4 years, and the inventory was all sold during the current year. Jogras de Magiba Company reported net income of 20 million and for the current year and paid 5 million cash dividend at year-end. So at the beginning of the current year daw, si Bogart Batumbakal, nag-purchase daw siya ng 40% of the ordinary shares outstanding ni Jogras de Magiba. So pag may 40% na siya, i-assume na natin na meron na tayong significant influence kay Jogras de Magiba. So ika-classify natin yung investment natin as investment in associate. So gagamit tayo ng equity method to our investment. So na-purchase niya yun for worth 15 million. Tapos, yung net assets daw ni Jogras de Magiba is amounted to 30 million. Nung date of acquisition daw, yung carrying amounts of identifiable assets and liabilities ni Jogras de Magiba ay equal sa kanilang mga fair values. Except sa dalawang item. Ano yun? So, si equipment daw, kung saan yung kanyang fair value was 7 million na mas mataas compared to its carrying amount. And si equipment daw na kung saan yung kanyang fair value was 2,500,000 pesos na mas mataas compared to its carrying amount. The equipment has a remaining life of 4 years, and the inventory was all sold during the current year. So yung si equipment daw, meron pa siyang remaining life of 4 years. Pakitandaan po yan, 4 years. And yung inventory daw was all sold, nabenta daw during the current year yung inventory. So si Jogras de Magiba Company daw ay nag-report ng net income na 20 million and paid 5 million cash dividend at year-end. So magko-compute muna tayo. So magkano yung excess muna? So we have acquisition cost na 15 million. And magkano yung carrying amount na nung net assets ni Jogras de Magiba? It's 30 million. But i-determine lang natin yung share natin na 40%. So 40% nung 30 million, it's equal to 12 million. So we have excess nung binayad natin over the carrying amount of the net assets acquired na 3 million. O, kasi naka-book value pa siya, hindi pa siya naka-fair value. So sang attributable tong 3 million na to. So, di ba, may dalawa tayong item of assets kanina na undervalued pa siya or hindi pa siya measured at fair value. So, ano na yon? So, yung excess na attributable, di ba yung equipment daw kanina is 7 million greater. Yung fair value ng equipment kanina is 7 million greater than its carrying amount. So, yung excess attributable to equipment is 7 million. Ita-times natin dun sa ating share na 40%. So, yung share lang natin dun sa undervaluation na yun is 2,800,000. And yung second item, ano na yun? Inventory. So, yung inventory daw is 2,500,000 greater than its carrying amount. So, ita-times natin sa ating share, which is 40%. So, yung share lang natin doon sa undervaluation na yon is 1 million. So, pag ipag-add natin ito, di parang 3,800,000 na siya. Di parang sobra na siya dito. Sumobra na. So magkano yung sobra? So we have excess nung net fair value nung identifiable net assets investee over cost na 800. So ito siya. So ang binayad talaga natin is 15 million lamang. But then yung fair value nung share natin doon sa identifiable net assets ni Jogras di Magiba is worth 15,800,000 kasi pagpapas lang natin sila. So yun, mas mataas nga yung fair value niya compared doon sa cost of our investment. So meron tayong tinatawag na excess of net fair value over cost. So i-account natin itong 800,000 nito as our what? As our income. So ito yung mga journal entries natin to record. So to record yung investment natin nung beginning nung current year, we debit investment associate na 15,000 at 15 million and we credit cash na 15 million. So to record naman doon sa share natin sa net income or doon sa ni-report ni Jogras di Magiba na income, magkano na ba yun? It's 20 million. 20 million ata. So, paano yun? So, kung nag-report sila ng income, of course, magre-report din tayo ng ating income. So, share in profit of associate natin, di ba 20 million yung ni-report niya na income. So, ita-times lang natin sa ating share, yung share lamang natin dun sa income na yon, it's 8 million. So, magre-record din tayo ng share in profit of associate natin na 8 million. So, yun siya. And we debit investment in associate na 8 million din. Kasi nga, sabi ko nga kanina, kung ano yung movement dun sa equity, di ba, tumaas yung equity ni investee dahil meron siyang net income, of course, mag-i-increase din natin yung investment in associate na account din natin for 8 million. So, to record naman yung the share in cash dividend na dineclared, ay na binayaran ni, sino na yun? Ni Jogras di Magiba. Magkano na yun? It's 5 million, di ba? O, 5 million. We credit cash. So, 5 million yun, di ba? Yung cash dividend na binayaran ni Jogras di Magiba. So, i-times lang natin sa ating share. So, we have 2 million. And we credit, babawasan natin investment in associate natin ng 2 million. So, bakit nangyari yun? So, for example, nung nag-declare si Jogras di Magiba ng cash dividend, ano yung naging entry niya? We debit we debit retained earnings and we credit dividends payable. So nung pag-debit niya nung retained earnings niya, di nabawasan na yung equity niya. Tapos nung nagbayad na siya, ano na yung entry natin nun? We debit dividends payable and we credit cash. So yun, kung nabawasan yung equity, dahil sa cash dividend is nabawasan yung equity ni investee. So, babawasan din natin yung investment in associate natin ng 2 million. So, kumbaga, ang nangyari dito is nagkaroon ng reduction sa ating investment or kumbaga return. Nagkaroon ng return sa ating investment in associate na or sa ating investment. So, nagkaroon lang po ng return yung nangyari dito. So, to record the amortization of the excess attributable dun sa equipment, magkano na yun? Yung share natin dun, yung share lamang natin, 2,800,000, di ba? Tapos, yung excess, i-amortize natin over its remaining useful life na 4 years. So, 2,800,000 divided by 4 years. So, babawasan natin si investment in associate account natin na 700,000. And katulad nga dun sa bullet kanina, kung gumawa tayo ng appropriate adjustment sa ating investment in associate na account, of course, i-adjust din natin yung ating share in profit of associate na account. So, we also debit, babawasan din natin yung share in profit of associate natin ng 700,000. So, to record naman dun sa amortization of the excess attributable to goodwill, so, di ba assuming ay sinabi naman sa problem na nabenta na yung inventory, nabenta lahat yung inventory during the period. So yung share natin doon na 1 million is i-expense natin. So babawasan natin yung investment in associate natin ng 1 million. So paano nangyari to? 'Di ba undervalued yung inventory doon sa book ni Jogras Di Magiba. So meaning kung undervalued siya, undervalued din yung kanyang cost of goods sold. So resulting sa overstatement of net income. So kung aayusin, kung i-adjust nila yung mga amount na yon, di bababa yung net income ni ni Jogras Di Magiba. So may decrease sa kanyang equity. So may decrease, of course, dapat may corresponding decrease din tayo sa ating investment. So we credit, bawasan natin yung investment na associate natin ng 1 million and we debit share in profit of associate na 1 million. So ito yung tinatawag natin na expense. I-expense natin yung excess attributable dun sa inventory pag nabenta siya. So ito yung entry natin. And to record the excess, which is yung 800,000, di ba dapat i-include natin siya as our investment income. So ano yung entry natin dyan? So we debit investment in associate na 800,000 and we credit share in profit na 800,000. So i-record natin siya as our income. So ang ating share in net income or yung doon sa share natin doon sa ni-report na income ni Jogras Di Magiba na 20 million, it is 8 million. I-less natin yung amortization of excess attributable sa equipment na 700,000 during the period, and yung amortization of excess attributable to inventory na 1 million, and yung excess nung net fair value na 800,000. So we have total net investment income na 7,100,000. So by the way, may nakalimutan po pala akong i-discuss kanina. So kung meron tayong undervaluation of the investee's asset na kung saan yung fair value nung asset ni investee is mas mataas compared sa carrying amount or sa book value niya, ang tawag doon is undervaluation. May tinatawag din tayong overvaluation na kung saan yung assets na yun ni investee, yung fair value niya is mas mababa compared sa kanyang carrying amount or book value. So, an overvaluation yung tawag doon. So, kung paano natin in-account or paano natin kinumpute yung sa undervaluation, ganun din yung gagawin natin sa overvaluation. So, kung may excess attributable sa overvaluation of depreciation nung asset, so yung excess, i-multiply natin sa ating share. Tapos, i-amortize kung depreciable asset siya or attributable yung overvaluation sa depreciable asset, i-amortize natin siya over its remaining useful life or i-divide natin siya over the remaining life ng depreciable asset na yon. If attributable yung overvaluation sa non-depreciable asset, of course, i-expense natin yon when it is sold. So, same lang siya dun sa undervaluation. Medyo maiiba lang dun sa journal entry. So, ganito yung journal entry natin. Kung yung journal entry natin sa undervaluation is ganito, we debit share in profit of associate na 80,000 and we credit investment in associate na 80,000. Ganito naman yung magiging journal entry natin sa overvaluation. So, kabaliktaran lang siya ng journal entry sa undervaluation. So, we debit investment in associate account na 80,000 and we credit share in profit of associate na 80,000. So bakit dinagdagan natin yung investment in associate natin sa overvaluation ng depreciable assets? So ganito yon. So dun sa book or sa ni investee, overvalued, or dun sa book ni associate or sa ni investee, overvalued daw yung depreciable asset. So meaning overvalued din yung kanyang depreciation expense. So, resulting siya sa understatement. So, kung understated yung net income ni investee, kailangan natin i-increase yung ating investment in associate account natin. So, kaya increase siya. So, yan yung journal entry. So, by the way, share in profit of associate yung ginamit namin kasi nag-base kami, yung presentation namin, binase namin sa book ni Sir Milan. But then, dun sa book ni Sir Valix, investment income yung ginamit nilang account. So, pag na-encounter natin investment income, same lang siya dun sa share in profit of associate. Tapos, kung halimbawa yung changes dun sa equity ni investee ay dahil sa component ng OCI, yung magiging account natin is share in OCI of associate. So, yun. So, let's proceed. So, let's discuss exemptions in applying the equity method. So, may mga conditions na kung saan si entity or si investor can be exempted in applying equity method. So, ano yung mga conditions na yon? So, under paragraph IPAS 28, paragraph 17, provides that an investment associate shall not be accounted for using the equity method if the investor is a parent that is exempt from preparing consolidated financial statement by the scope exemption in paragraph 4A of PFRS 10. So, si investor daw, isa siyang parent. So, meaning meron siyang investment in subsidiary. Tapos, meron din siyang investment in associate. So, kung si investor daw na parent is exempted, is exempt from preparing consolidated financial statement by the scope na provided sa paragraph 4A of PFRS 10. So, hindi na natin i-discuss yung kung ano yung andun sa PFRS 10 kasi I believe i-discuss siya ng mga susunod na group. So, yun, si parent daw or si investor need not to apply equity method. So, or the investor shall not be accounted for using the equity method. So, exempted daw si investor in applying equity method. Or, if all of the following apply. So, kung itong apat na to is present, si entity or si investor can be exempted in applying equity method. So, una, the investor is a wholly owned subsidiary or is a partially owned subsidiary of another entity and its other owners do not object to the investor not applying the equity method. So, si entity daw tayo or si investor, subsidiary daw tayo regardless kung tayo man ay wholly owned or partially owned. So, meaning kung subsidiary tayo, meron tayong parent. Tapos, kung yung parent daw natin at yung parent ng parent natin is in-inform natin sila na hindi tayo mag-a-apply ng equity method and hindi sila nag-object, so yun, exempted tayo in applying equity method. So letter B, the investor debt or equity instruments are not traded in a public market or over-the-counter market. So yung ating daw, as an investor, yung ating debt or equity instrument daw are not traded in a public market, meaning hindi siya publicly listed, for which the public can purchase ownership sa ating company. So kung hindi siya publicly traded, exempted tayo in applying equity method. So letter C, the investor did not file or not in the process of filing financial statement with the SEC for the purpose of issuing any class of instrument in a public market. So tayo daw na investor, hindi daw tayo nag-file or hindi din daw tayo in the process of filing yung financial statement natin with Securities and Exchange Commission for the purpose na yung instrument natin ay maging publicly traded. So kung dito, dapat hindi talaga siya publicly listed. Dito, dapat daw hindi ka din nag-file or hindi ka in the process of filing financial statement sa SEC. Kasi kung nag-file ka or kahit nasa in the process ka pa lang of filing financial statement, in filing your financial statement, required ka na gumamit ng equity method. So, dapat hindi ka nag-file or hindi ka din dapat in the process of filing. So last, the ultimate or any intermediate parent of the investor produces consolidated financial statements available for public use that comply with PFRS. So tayo na entity or si investor na may investment in associate, yung ultimate parent natin, ultimate parent, ito yung nagsimula talaga ng lahat. or yung ating any intermediate parent or yung sumunod kay ultimate parent, yun yung intermediate parent. So kung tayo daw na investor, yung ultimate parent natin or any intermediate parent produces consolidated financial statement available for public use that comply with PFRS, ay exempted tayo in applying equity method. So these four conditions ay dapat present para yung entity or si investor maging exempted in applying equity method. So let's discuss potential voting rights. So potential voting rights held by the investor that are currently exercisable or convertible are considered only in assessing the existence of significant influence. Potential voting rights include share warrants, share call options, share rights, and debt or equity instruments. So itong apat na to, pwede silang maging voting rights. Pero as of the moment, potential pa lang siya. Pwede siyang maging voting rights if currently exercisable siya or convertible into ordinary shares. Alam naman natin na yung ordinary share, siya yung may voting rights. So, kung may hawak si investor nito, tapos currently exercisable siya, or kumbaga sa prutas, hinog na pipitasin na lang, and convertible siya into ordinary shares, we can consider this in assessing kung meron nga bang existence of significant influence or wala si investor over kay investee. However, when potential voting rights exist, the investor's share of profit or loss of the investee and of changes in the investee's equity is determined on the basis of present ownership interest. So kung meron ng potential voting rights na hawak si investor, tapos ginamit natin siya or kinonsider natin siya in computing or in assessing kung meron ng significant influence or wala, hindi natin gagamitin yung na-compute natin. Kung hindi natin gagamitin yung na-compute natin doon sa pag-compute ng share natin sa profit or loss ni investee or doon sa changes sa equity ni investee, but yung gagamitin natin is yung present na ownership interest natin. So, i-exclude natin yung effect nung potential voting rights. So, yung potential voting rights, i-considered lamang natin siya in assessing kung meron ng existence of significant influence, pero kung i-determine na natin yung ating share sa profit or loss ni investee or dun sa changes sa equity ni investee, ang gagamitin natin is yung present ownership interest natin. So para mas lalo po natin maintindihan, may pinrepare po akong sample illustration. So Pepper Company owns 15,000 shares out of the 100,000 outstanding shares of Morgan Company. Pepper Company also holds 20,000 stock rights, which enable it to acquire additional Morgan Company shares on a 2 rights for 1 share basis. These stock rights are exercisable immediately. However, Pepper Company management does not intend to exercise the stock right. Morgan Company does not have any stock rights outstanding aside from those held by Pepper Company. Morgan Company reports profit of 1 million pesos and declares cash dividends of 100,000. The investment has a carrying amount of 300,000 at the beginning of the period. Compute for the following: share in the profit of the associate and carrying amount of the investment at the end of reporting period. So si Pepper Company daw owns 15,000 shares out of the 100,000 outstanding shares ni Morgan Company. Tapos si Pepper Company din daw also holds 20,000 stock rights, which enable it to acquire additional Morgan Company shares on a 2 rights for 1 share basis. So stock rights, diba, potential voting rights yan. So convertible daw siya into 2 rights for 1 share basis. Kung i-convert natin itong 20,000 stock rights into ordinary shares, ilan siya? So 10,000 ordinary shares. So may additional na 10,000 ordinary shares si Pepper Company. The stock rights are currently exercisable. So napaka-importante nito, dapat yung hawak mong stock rights or potential voting rights is currently exercisable siya, dahil kung hindi, i-ignore natin siya in the computation or in assessing kung meron nga ba tayong significant influence or wala. So, currently exercisable siya, meaning i-include natin siya sa computation in determining or in assessing kung meron nga ba tayong significant influence or wala. However, Pepper Company does not intend to exercise the stock rights. So, kahit yung management ni investor is hindi niya intend to actually exercise yung stock rights na hawak niya but it is currently exercisable, makukonsidered pa din natin siya as our potential voting rights na magagamit natin in the computation of or in assessing the existence of significant influence. Morgan Company does not have any other stock rights aside daw dun sa hawak ni Pepper Company. Morgan Company, nag-report daw siya ng income or profit na 1 million pesos and nag-declare din siya ng cash dividends ng 100,000 pesos. The investment has a carrying amount of 300,000 at the beginning of the period. So yung investment daw ni Pepper Company has a carrying amount of 300,000 pesos at the beginning of the period. So i-compute natin yung share in profit of the associate and carrying amount of the investment at the end of the period. So before that, kailangan muna natin alamin kung meron nga bang existence of significant influence. So i-compute muna natin. So magkano na yung share presently held ni Pepper Company? It's 15,000. Tapos i-add natin dyan yung kinonvert natin na stock rights into ordinary shares na 10,000. Di ba nagkaroon siya ng additional 10,000 ordinary shares dahil meron siyang 20,000 stock rights na convertible into 2 rights for 1 share basis. So equivalent siya sa 10,000 ordinary shares. So may additional siyang 10,000. So ang total shares talaga na ni Pepper Company is 25,000. I-divide natin yan sa outstanding shares na meron si Morgan Company plus yung na-exercise na rights which is yung 10,000. So meron siyang 110,000 outstanding shares after exercise of rights si Morgan Company. So ilang percent yon? So 22.73%. So merong 22.73% ownership interest si Pepper Company over Morgan Company. So there is a significant influence exists. So pag na-determine na natin na meron na tayong significant influence over an investee or kay associate na, gagamit na tayo ng equity method. So ginagamit lang natin yung potential voting rights in assessing significant influence. But then, yung present ownership talaga na ni Pepper Company is that 15,000. I-divide natin sa outstanding shares ni Morgan Company na 100,000. Exclude dyan yung potential voting rights na kinonvert natin kanina. So, ang talagang present ownership interest ni Pepper Company is 15,000. So ito yung gagamitin natin kung i-determine na natin yung ating share sa profit or loss ni investee or dun sa changes sa equity ni investee. So yun, yung potential voting rights na na-exercise natin is ginagamit lang po yun in assessing kung meron nga bang significant influence or wala. Pero i-exclude natin yung effect ng potential voting rights at ang gagamitin natin is yung present ownership interest talaga natin for the computation or in the determination ng ating share sa profit or loss or sa equity ni investee. So sagutan na natin yung pinapahanap na yung requirements do sa problem. So yung journal entry natin sa book ni Pepper Company is as follows. So nung December 31, 20X1, di ba nag-report siya ng profit ng 1 million tapos 15,000 lang talaga yung present ownership interest ni Pepper Company. So 1 million times 15,000, we have 150,000 pesos share in profit of associate and we debit investment in associate na 150,000 also. And then yung cash dividend naman na dineclare ni Morgan Company is 100,000. Ita-times lang natin yung present ownership interest natin na 15,000. So na 15%. So, equivalent siya sa 15,000. So, we debit dividends receivable na 15,000 and we credit investment in associate dahil nagkaroon na tayo ng return of investment, kumbaga. And yung answer dun sa requirements natin, di ba yung letter A, ilan daw yung share in profit of the associate. So, what we have 150,000 pesos. So, ni-refer lang siya natin dito kasi ito lang yung na-record natin. So, we have 150,000 pesos and magkano na daw yung carrying amount ng investment at the end of the reporting period. So, magti-T account tayo. So, nung beginning daw, yung carrying amount ng investment is 300,000. Tapos, nagkaroon tayo ng share in profit. Ito siya, na 150,000. And then, nung December 31, nagkaroon ng dividend. Nag-declare ng dividend si Morgan Company. So, i-deduct natin siya sa carrying amount ng investment in associate account natin. So, we have 435,000 balance at the end of the reporting period. So, yun siya. Yung ginagamit natin in the determination of our share sa profit or loss ni investor or sa changes sa equity niya is yung present talaga. Ini-exclude po natin yung effect nung potential voting rights. So, yun po. So, that's the end of my presentation. So, for the continuation po ng discussion ng PAS 28, our next presenter is si Ms. KAYSY Castillo.
So, ayun. Thank you so much, Miss Irish. So, mag-move on naman tayo sa discussion ng cumulative preference shares, relationship between the investment in associate account and associates equity, and as well as the discontinuance of the equity method. So, start muna tayo sa discussion ng cumulative preference share. But before that, let us first define what is a preference share to make you more familiar. So, ayan. Preference share is commonly referred to as preferred stock. So, from the word itself, preferred, meaning they are guaranteed as priority. And preference shares also comes with no voting rights, but they do provide an advantage over ordinary shareholders when it comes to receiving dividends. So, kung i-compare natin si ordinary share kay preference share, so si ordinary share is residual lang yung nature niya. Kumbaga, kung ano lang yung tira ni preference share, is yun lang yung pwede niyang ma-receive. So, for example, kapag yung company is nakaranas ng bankruptcy and kailangan nang i-distribute yung mga dividends, so ang unang mabibigyan is the preference share. So, because they possess the nature to be the priority. So, yung tira doon, yun lang ang marireceive ni ordinary shares. So, ganun po yun. So, next. So, in preference share issued by an associate naman, sabi, if an associate has outstanding preference share held by other parties other than the investor computes its share of profit or loss after making these following three adjustments. So sabi sa una, kapag yung preference share is cumulative, so we deduct 1 year dividend. So whether dineclare siya or not, before computing the share in the profit or loss of the associate. So second is, kapag ang preference share is non-cumulative naman. So we deduct dividends only kapag dineclared before computing the share in the associate's profit or loss. And the third one is kapag yung preference share daw is redeemable. So wala tayong dividends na i-deduct when computing for the share in associate's profit or loss. So ayun, next. So here is a sample problem to make you more familiar doon sa tatlo kanina na nabanggit ko. So A1 ko owns 20% of Alam Co's ordinary shares. Alam ko also has an outstanding cumulative 6% preference shares of 2 million pesos. None of those preference shares is held by A1 ko. Dividends are in arrears for 3 years. And Alam ko reported profit of 1 million and declared no dividends. So these are the 4 requirements na kailangan nating i-compute. So for letter A, how much is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? Letter B, what if Alam ko declared dividends that pay all the dividends in arrears? How much is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? Letter C, what if the preference share is non-cumulative? How much is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? And for letter D, what if the shares are redeemable preference shares and alam ko declared 150,000 cash dividends on those shares? How much is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? So ayan, to compute for letter A, so we need to compute the share in the profit or loss of the associate. So to get that, dahil sinabi ng problem na it has outstanding cumulative preference share, and also sinabi na no dividends were declared, so ganito siya. So kung maalala nyo yung sinabi ko kanina when it comes to cumulative preference shares, so di ba we deduct 1-year dividends whether dineclare or hindi. So ganito siya i-compute. So the 1 million na profit of alam ko, so less natin yung 1-year dividend, which is computed as the 2 million pesos times the 6%. So we will get 880,000 adjusted profit of the associate. And from that, dun pa lang natin i-multiply yung 20% na ownership interest. So to arrive at 176,000 na share in profit of the associate. So ayun. So for letter B, sabi what if alam ko declared dividends that pay all the dividends in arrears? How much is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? So same computation lang siya kasi whether dineclare siya or not, magbabawas pa rin tayo ng 1-year dividend. So the answer is still 176,000 pesos share in profit of the associate. So ayun. So for letter C, what if preference share naman daw is non-cumulative? So how much is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? So dahil non-cumulative siya, meaning magdededuct lang tayo ng dividends pag dineclare. Pero dahil sinabi sa problem na no dividends were declared, so proceed na tayo kaagad sa computation ng share in the profit of the associate. So from the profit of 1 million, i-multiply na natin siya kaagad sa 20% na ownership interest. So we will arrive at the share in profit of the associate na 200,000 pesos. So ganun lang siya kadali. And for letter D, sabi what if the shares are redeemable preference shares and nag-declare daw ng 150,000 na cash dividends? So what is the share in the profit or loss of the associate? So yung computation is still the same. Kasi no adjustment is necessary for the preference share that is considered a debt instrument. So the associate's profit of 1 million is necessarily would have been reduced by the dividends declared. So proceed tayo sa 1 million na profit times the ownership interest na 20%. So we will get the share in profit of the associate na 200,000. So ayun. So next is, so sa relationship naman between the investment in associate account and associate equity, sabi, the investment in associate account will approximate the investor's interest in the carrying amount of the associate's residual equity in the long run. So approximate meaning, so relative sila with each other, or I should say, close yung value or amount nila. So ayun, gaya ng sabi ni Miss Irish kanina na kung ano yung effect sa investment in associate account, so ganun din yung magiging effect sa associate's equity. So if ever na nag-decrease yung associate account, magdi-decrease din yung equity ni associate. So ganun lang siya. And for the discontinuance of equity method, Past 28, paragraph 22 provides that an investor shall discontinue the use of the equity method from the date that it ceases to have significant influence over an associate. So, tandaan natin na ginagamit ang equity method kapag meron tayong significant influence, and kapag nawala yon, so i-discontinue na natin yung paggamit ng equity method. And kapag hindi na equity method yung gagamitin natin is mas madali na siya. So, it's either financial asset at fair value through profit or loss, or financial asset at fair value through other comprehensive income, and pwede ding non-marketable investment at cost or investment in unquoted equity instrument. So, ayun. So dito naman tayo sa measurement after the loss of the significant influence. So dahil tumigil na tayo sa paggamit ng equity method, PAS 28, paragraph 22 provides that on the date the significant influence is lost, the investor shall measure any retained investment in associate at fair value. So shift tayo dito, and nangyayari ito when the investor loses the power to participate in the financial and operating policy decision ng investee. So pwede din itong mangyari without the loss of voting power or a change in ownership level. So hindi na siya i-measure at its carrying amount but on its fair value na. So and the difference between the carrying amount of the retained investment at the date the significant influence is lost and the fair value of the retained investment shall be included in the profit or loss. So take note na kapag yung loss of significant influence is due to decrease of ownership or the below 20%, so i-account natin siya using the financial asset at fair value under PFRS 9. And kapag nangyari yung loss of significant influence due to the increase in ownership or above the 50%, so i-account naman natin siya in investment in subsidiary under PFRS 3 and PFRS 10. So, ayun. So, here is another sample problem para maintindihan natin yung loss of significant influence. So, on January 1, 20X1, Blue Corporation acquired 30,000 ordinary shares of Azul Corporation, representing 30% interest for 3 million. So, on this date, Azul's net asset have a carrying amount of 8 million pesos and a fair value of 10 million pesos. So, the difference is attributable to an undervalued building with a remaining useful life of 10 years. Azul uses the straight line method of depreciation. So, in 20X1, Azul reported profit of 1 million pesos and paid cash dividends of 600,000. Azul shares are selling at 100 pesos per share on December 31, 20X1. On July 1, 20X2, Blue Corporation sold 60% of its investment in Azul shares at a prevailing market price of 120 pesos per share. Azul reported interim profit of 500,000 for 6 months ended June 30, 20X2. And on December 3, 20X2, Azul reported total profit of 1,200,000 pesos for the year and declare 1 million cash dividends. The shares are quoted at 135 pesos per shares at year end. So this is the entry to record the purchase. So on January 1, 20X1, so we debit investment in associate and credit to cash amounting to 3 million pesos. So this is the Azul's ordinary shares acquired by the Blue Corporation. So ayun. So the next entry is the compound entry naman to record the share in profit and receipt of cash dividends in 20X1. So on December 31, 20X1, we debit cash amounting to 180,000 pesos, which is computed as the 600,000 cash dividends, then multiply natin sa 30% interest. And next is we credit share in profit of the associate na 300,000 na na-compute natin by multiplying the 30% so 1 million na profit, and the difference is also a debit to investment in associate of 120,000 pesos. So another entry naman is to adjust the share in profit for the depreciation of the undervaluation of the building. So again, on December 31, 20X1, we debit investment in associate of 60,000 pesos. Then i-credit natin sa share in profit of the associate. So to compute the 60,000 pesos, we get the difference of the 10 million na fair value kanina and the 8 million na carrying amount of the net asset. Then i-multiply natin sa 30% na interest. So makukuha natin is 600,000 pesos. Tapos, i-divide natin sa 10 years na remaining useful life to arrive at the 60,000 pesos. So next. So this entry naman is to adjust the carrying amount of the investment prior to the sale on July 1, 20x2. So the entry is debit to investment in associate and credit to share in profit of the associate amounting to 150,000. So nakuha yon kasi minultiply natin yung 500,000 na interim profit doon sa 30% na interest. So ayun. So another entry is to debit to share in profit of the associate and credit to investment in associate amounting to 30,000, which is na-compute natin by multiplying the 60,000 share in profit in undervaluation of the building, yung na-compute natin kanina. Tapos i-multiply natin siya sa 6/12 since yung date is July 1, so half na siya ng year. So 6/12 siya. So we will get the 30,000 pesos. So below is how we compute naman the carrying amount of the investment on the date of sale. So using AT account, makikita natin dito sa debit side yung pinurchase nating 3 million noong January 1, 20x1. Then the share in profit nung 20x1 na 300,000. And the share in profit ng 20x2 na 150,000. And sa credit side naman, andyan yung 180,000 na cash dividends. 60,000 share in undervaluation ng building nung 20x1. And the 30,000 share in undervaluation nung 20x2. So we will get the carrying amount of 3,180,000 on July 1, 20x2. So ayan. So this is the entry naman to record the sale. So on July 1, 20x2, debit to cash of 2,160,000 na nakuha natin by multiplying the 30,000 shares to the 60% sold portion. Then i-multiply natin ulit sa 120 pesos na market price per share. Tapos i-credit natin to investment in associate, which is 1,890,000 na na-compute natin using the 3,180,000 na carrying amount kanina times the 60% na sold portion ng 20x2. So yun. And the difference, pag in-squeeze natin is a gain on sale of investment of 252,000. So take note na yung gain on sale is i-recognize natin in profit or loss. And pagkatapos ng sale is yung unsold portion ng investment is i-classify natin because it is presumed that the significant influence is lost. So kung maalala natin kanina, yung 30% interest is nag-reduce siya ng below 20%. So paano nangyari yon? So actually yung present present interest niya na is 12%. So, nakuha natin yun by multiplying the 30% kanina, yung 20x1, doon sa 40% na unsold portion ng 20x2. So, ganun yun. Kasi, di ba yung binigay sa problem is 60% na sold portion. So, ita-times natin yung 30% kanina na interest sa 40%. So, we will get the 12% na present interest. So, nag-reduce na siya ng below 20%. So, ibig sabihin na loss na natin yung significant influence. So, this next entry is to reclassify, reclassify the remaining shares. So, again, on July 1, 20x2, we debit held for trading securities of 1,440,000, which is the 30,000 shares multiplied by 40,000, which is the unsold portion. Then, i-multiply natin ulit sa 120 pesos na market price per share. Then, credit to investment in associate of 1,272,000 na nakuha natin by multiplying the 40% na unsold portion dun sa carrying amount kanina na 3,180,000. So, yung difference ulit, pag in-squeeze natin yan, is a credit to gain on reclassification na 168,000. So take note again that the gain on reclassification is i-recognize natin in profit or loss. So here is again another entry to record naman the dividend income. So on December 31, 20x2, debit to dividend receivable and credit to dividend income of 120,000, which is na-compute natin gamit yung 1 million na dineclared na dividends times natin sa present na ownership interest na 12%. So, ayun, nakuha natin yung 120,000. And this last entry is to recognize the change in fair value of the investment held for trading securities. So, on December 31, 20x2 again, debit to held for trading securities and credit to unrealized gain to profit or loss na 180,000 pesos. So, to get that, kunin muna natin yung difference na 135 pesos na quoted price and the 120 pesos na prevailing market price. And then yung difference nila is i-multiply natin sa 12,000 shares. So we will get the 180,000. And lastly, to compute the total investment-related income, recognized in profit or loss ng 20x2, so, kunin muna natin yung net share in profit of associate na yung January 1 is i-less natin yung sa June. So, makukumpute natin yun sa 150,000 less 30,000. So, we will get 120,000. Tapos, next is the gain on sale of 252,000 and then 168,000 gain on reclassification, 120,000 dividend income, and 180,000 unrealized gain on change of the fair value. So, we will get the total income recognized in a profit or loss ng 20x2 na 840,000. So, that's all for my report. Let us move on to the next reporter, Miss RICA Mayo.
Topic natin ngayon is reclassification of cumulative OCI. All amounts previously recognized in other comprehensive income in relation to the investment are either reclassified or transferred straight to retained earnings using the provisions of other PFRS when the equity method is discontinued. If ownership interest is reduced but significant influence or joint control is not lost, only the proportionate amount of the OCI relating to the reduction of interest is reclassified to profit or loss or transferred directly to retained earnings. Illustration 1. Extraco owns 30% of Course Incorporation's ordinary share. On July 1, 2020, Extraco sold half of its investment for 400,000. The adjusted balances of the related accounts immediately before the sale are as follows. Investment in associate, 1,200,000. Cumulative share in associates, exchange differences on translation of a foreign operation, 500,000. Sabi dito, the remaining 15% does not give Extraco significant influence over Course Incorporation. Ang entry mo, para ma-record mo yung sale mo ng investment on July 1, 2020 is cash, 400,000, yung pinangbayad mo, ay marireceive mong cash, 400,000, and then loss on the sale of investment, 200,000, and investment in associate credit, 600,000. Bakit nga ba siya nagkaroon ng loss? Kasi nga, ang kanyang investment in associate is 1,200,000. Ang sabi dito, only half of its investment ang kanyang ibinenta. Kaya 1,200,000 times mo siya sa 50% or half ng kanyang, or divided by 2 mo siya is equal to 600,000. Eh, ang pinangbenta mo lang 400,000. Kaya magkakaroon ka talaga ng loss on sale of investment na 200,000. And then on July 1, 2020, ang magiging entry mo is debit, translation of foreign operation, 500,000. Tapos, gain on reclassification to profit or loss, 500,000. Kasi nga, sabi dito, yung 15 ownership niya na remaining does not give extra cost significant influence. Hindi niya binigyan ng significant influence. So, ang ibig sabihin nun, yung whole amount ng kanyang cumulative share in associates exchange is mare-reclassify to profit or loss. Yung whole amount. Ito, sabi niya, to record the reclassification adjustment of OCI. And then next illustration is the same problem, pero sabi dito, ang pinagkaiba lang, yung remaining 15% naman daw niya still gives extra cost significant influence. Ano nga bang i-entry natin kapag ganito? Kapag still, sabi niya, binigyan pa rin siya ng significant influence. On July 1, 2020, the same as nung unang problem, magkakaroon pa rin siya ng loss na 200,000, makakareceive siya ng cash na 400,000, and mag-credit pa rin siya ng 600,000. Ito yung record nga ng sale niya. And then, noong July 1, 2020, ang i-entry mo kasi nga, di ba dito binigyan pa rin siya ng significant influence. So, ang i-entry mo, mag-debit ka ng translation of foreign operation, 250,000. Gain on reclassification, 250,000. Bakit 250,000? Kasi nga, still, sabi niya dito, gives significant influence. Ang sabi kanina doon, kapag binigyan pa rin siya ng significant influence, only the proportionate amount of the investment of the associate yung kanya magre-reclassify, which is 50% of 50% of 500,000 kasi nga half yung sinold niya, edi maha-half din yung kanyang cumulative share in associate. Yung half ng 500,000, yun lang yung kanyang i-reclassify. Okay, next illustration tayo. Ito, paano nga ba i-entry kapag transfer mo yung OCI directly to your equity? Same problem, tapos sabi niya dito, yung remaining ownership niya na 15%, gaya nung sa una nating illustration, hindi siya binigyan ng significant influence. So, yung July 1, 2020, same pa rin, cash, 400,000, tapos debit loss on sale, 200,000, investment in associate, 600,000 to record the sale of investment. Ngayon, at dahil hindi siya binigyan ng significant influence, yung whole amount ng kanyang foreign translation, ang iyong i-transfer directly to equity, which is magkakaroon ka ng debit, revaluation surplus, associate, 500,000, and retained earnings na 500,000 to record the recognition of cumulative OCI. And then next is yung severe long-term restriction. Ano nga ba ito? Ito yung mga restrictions that hinder the exercise of the rights of a holding company over the assets or management of a subsidiary undertaking. Severe long-term restrictions may be used as grounds for excluding a subsidiary from consolidation. If it is so excluded, a subsidiary should be treated as fixed asset investment. When an associate functioning under severe long-term restrictions that severely hinder its ability to transmit funds to investor, Clause 28 does not allow an investor who continues to have significant control over the associate not to use equity method. And the next is yung change to equity method, gain of significant influence. Significant influence may be achieved from additional purchase of shares resulting from increase in ownership interest. Although not especially addressed in Clause 28, this type of acquisition may be accounted for by PFRS 3, which is the business combinations, particularly on the accounting for business combination achieved in stages. Sabi nga doon sa business combination, PFRS 3 states that the acquirer shall remeasure its previously held equity interest in the acquiree at its acquisition date, fair value, and record the corresponding gain or loss, if any, in the profit or loss or other comprehensive income, as appropriate in the business combination completed in stages. Illustration 1 is ito. On January 1, 2019, Calco acquired 10,000 shares out of 100,000 outstanding shares of CAM Incorporation for 800,000. the investment was classified as held for trading securities. In 2019, CAM Incorporated reported a profit of 5 million and paid dividends of 1 million. The fair value of the shares on December 31, 2019 is 85 per share. Ang journal entry natin dyan is held for trading securities, 800,000 and cash, 800,000. Ito yung entry sa pag-acquire mo ng kanilang 10,000 shares, which is 800,000. And then, noong December 31, 2019, nagkaroon siya ng 1 million, nag-paid dividend siya ng 1 million. So, ibig sabihin, magkakaroon siya ng cash na 100,000 and then dividend income 100,000. Paano nga ba nakuha yung 100,000? Yung paid dividends niya na 1 million times niya sa 10% is equal to 100,000. Bakit 10%? Kasi yung 10,000 shares na acquired niya divided by 100,000 outstanding shares of CAM Incorporated, which is magre-result sa 10%. And then another entry for December 31, 2019 is yung held for trading securities, 50,000. And then unrealized gain, profit or loss na 50,000. 50,000 kasi yung 10,000 shares na acquired mo multiplied by the 85 pesos per share, which is 850,000, yun yung fair value ng investment mo. Less mo yung 800,000 na pinangbayad mo. Kaya magkakaroon ka ng gain na 50,000. Dito, nakanote sa baba na the carrying amount on the investment on December 31, 2019 is 850,000, equal to fair value. Ito nga, 10,000 shares times 85 per share. And then next, another, noong July 1, 2020, Calco acquired additional 15,000 shares. Nag-acquire ulit siya ng another 15,000. Ang fair value nun is 70 per share, resulting to an increase in the ownership interest of 10% to 25. Paano nga ba naging 25% yan? Ito, number of shares previously held, which is 10,000, additional, mag-a-add ka ng yung additional purchases mo, which is 15,000, yung additional share na in-acquired mo. Magkakaroon ka ngayon ng shares held na 25,000. Divided by the CAM's outstanding share, which is 100,000, magkakaroon ka ng new ownership interest, which is 25%. Journal entries, July 1, 2020, investment in associate, 1,050,000, debit, cash, 1,050,000, credit. Ito yung to record your purchases of additional share. Paano nga ba naging 1,050,000? Sabi dito, yung 15,000 shares na additional na in-acquire mo, times mo sa fair value per share niya, which is 70, magkakaroon ka ng 1,050,000. And then another entry for July 1, 2020 is unrealized loss, profit or loss, 150,000. And then held for trading securities, 150,000. Yan. Paano nga ba nagkaroon ng loss na 150,000? Kasi 'di ba sabi kanina, ang fair value ng 10,000 shares na in-acquired mo is 850,000. And then dito, yung fair value ng bagong acquired mong share is 70 per share. Kaya 10,000 times 70 is 700,000. Kaya magkakaroon ka ng 850,000 less the 700,000, which is 150,000. Ito yung to recognize the loss on remeasurement of previously held equity interest. Another entry for July 1, 2020 is investment in associate, 700,000, held for trading securities, 700,000. Ito na yung nare-reclassify na amount ng previously held mo na investment in associate, which is 10,000 times 70 per share. Ito yung bago niyang fair value. Sabi dito, number of shares previously held, 10,000, multiplied by the fair value per share on July 1, 2020, which is 70 pesos. Ito na yung magiging fair value of the existing investment at the acquisition date, which is 700,000. And then yung July 1, yung loss mo doon, the loss on remeasurement is recognized in profit or loss because the previously held equity interest was originally classified as fair value, profit, or loss. And then yung magiging carrying amount na ng new investment mo on July 1, 2020 is computed as follows. Yung purchase cost mo, which is 1,050,000. And then yung reclassification date fair value mo, which is 700,000. Magkakaroon ka ng carrying amount of investment in associate noong July 1, 2020 na 1,750,000. Another illustration. Use the information in the preceding illustration. Same pa rin daw ng problem, except that the investment was initially recognized as fair value of other comprehensive income. Ang magiging entry mo doon noong July 1, 2020 is investment in associate, 1,050,000, cash, credit, 1,050,000. Same pa rin nung sa last problem natin, para ma-record mo lang yung another acquisition mo, yung pag-acquired mo ng 15,000 shares. And then yung loss, kanina, unrealized loss, i-record mo na siya sa OCI. Hindi na siya sa profit or loss, kundi sa OCI. Kasi nga, sabi dito, yung investment was except that the investment was initially classified as fair value of other comprehensive income na. Kanina kasi is fair value of profit or loss. Ngayon, OCI na. Kaya yung unrealized loss mo, i-recognize mo na siya sa other comprehensive income, which is 150,000. And then July 1, 2020, investment in associate mo, 700,000, and investment in equity securities, fair value of other comprehensive income, 700,000. FBOCI, kasi nga, yung investment mo is initially classified as fair value of OCI. Kanina kasi, di ba kanina yung fair value of profit or loss, kaya doon mo din siya ni-recognize. Ngayon, at dahil nasa OCI na siya, doon mo din siya i-recognize. And then, July 1, 2020, another entry is retained earnings, 100,000, unrealized gain, loss sa OCI, 100,000. Paano nga ba nakuha yung 100,000? Yung 10,000 shares mo, tapos yung 18 na acquisition cost, which is yung 800,000 divided by the 10,000 shares, which is 80, and then yung 70 ng fair value on July 1, 2020 is equal to 100,000 loss. Ito, sabi niya dito, to transfer directly within the equity the cumulative gains recognized in OCI. Okay, yan lang po yung report ko. Next we'll report the intercompany transaction.
Thank you, Miss Anna. And the next topic would be the intercompany transaction. Dito sa intercompany transaction, yung investor kasi at si associate is meron silang transaction na sale of inventory, land, or depreciable asset. And basically, doon sa transaction nila is meron silang i-report na profit or losses sa kanilang separate financial statement. So now, under ng investment in associate accounting, we are using the equity method, which says that the investor and the associate is one and the same entity. So the question is, tama ba na mag-recognize sila ng profit or losses to their intercompany transaction? So tama ba na may income? Ang sagot ay wala kasi nga sila ay iisang entity. So as I discussed, the upstream and the downstream transaction is dito natin malalaman. Upstream and downstream transaction. When we say upstream, basically, the seller is the associate going to the investor. So ang assumption kasi dito, kaya nasa taas yung location ng investor kasi nga siya yung nag-invest. So, kapag sinabi nating upstream is pataas yung transaction na mula sa baba kay associate going to the investor. Kapag sinabi naman nating downstream transaction, is yun lang din yung kabaliktaran na kung saan ang seller ay si investor papunta kay associate. At sinabi ko na nga kanina na sa kanilang transaction is magre-report sila ng profit or losses sa kanilang separate financial statement. Pero under nga ng equity method, sila ay iisang entity. Therefore, we have to prepare the combined financial report and we are going to eliminate the profit or losses in the upstream and downstream transaction. Pero only up to the extent of the investor's interest lang. So, when we are going to recognize the unrealized profit or losses, since ineliminate natin ito sa intercompany transaction. So, we recognize the profit or losses once the asset is sold to an unrelated party or if the asset is being consumed through the depreciation. So, to illustrate, let's proceed to the illustration. Illustration 1, downstream sale. ABC Corporation owns 20% of XYZ Incorporated outstanding ordinary shares. On December 31, 20X1, ABC sold an equipment with a historical cost of 150,000 and accumulated depreciation of 50,000 to XYZ for 120,000. Equal to the fair value of the equipment has remaining useful life of 10 years. Both ABC and XYZ use a straight line method of depreciation. So the entry to record the downstream sale in December 31, 20X1, debit cash of 120,000, debit accumulated depreciation 50,000, credit equipment of 150,000, credit gain of 20,000. So the gain on the intercompany transaction is we are going to eliminate the 20% of the ownership of the investor. So yung entry to record, the elimination in December 31, 20X1, debit, gain 4,000, credit investment in associate na 4,000. So since the 4,000 computed as the 20,000 gain of intercompany transaction times the 20% of the ownership of the investor. And since yung gains and losses sa ating intercompany transaction is ini-eliminate natin sila against sa investment in associate account. What if yung investment in associate natin is amounted to 3,000 na lang? So to record the eliminate gain, debit gain of 4,000 and credit investment in associate na 3,000. So, yung excess na gain na 1,000 is i-recognize natin siya as deferred gain. So, we credit the deferred gain of 1,000. So going back, paano natin marirealize ngayon yung unrealized gain natin na ineliminate natin sa intercompany transaction? So assuming si company is nag-decide siya na gamitin yung equipment. So from December 31, 20X2, the equipment depreciated. Meaning, nagamit na yung equipment, nagkaroon na ng economic benefit. So that's the time na yung unrealized gain natin is will be recognized in the profit or loss over the useful life of the equipment. So yung entry to record the recognized gain, December 31, 20X2, debit investment in associate, 400, credit gain of 400. So yung 400 na compute natin as the 4,000 of the unrealized gain of intercompany transaction divided by the useful life of the equipment of the 10 years. 10 years pala to. And what if naman in year 4, yung equipment is binenta ng company to an unrelated party. So yung remaining na unrealized gain natin will now be realized in the profit or loss. Illustration 2, upstream sale. Use information in illustration 1 except that the sale is upstream. XYZ, the associate, is the seller. So yung entry to record the upstream sale December 31, 20x1, debit equipment of 120,000, credit cash of 120,000. So, assuming si associate is siya yung nag-record ng gain. So, the investor will eliminate its share in profit of 4,000. So, yung entry to record the share in associate gain, December 31, 20x1, debit share in profit of associate 4,000, credit investment in associate 4,000. The next topic is yung share in losses. So dito sa share in losses, may instances kasi na si associate is nagkakaroon ng losses. And since si investor at si associate ay isang entity, therefore kailangan natin mag-recognize ng share ni investor. So ang entry to record the loss, we debit loss on investment, credit investment in associate. Since ito ay kabawasan sa ating investment. Meron lang itong subtopic na yung tinatawag na investee with heavy losses. So, anong ibig sabihin nun? Nag-invest ka, nagkaroon ka ng significant influence. Ang problema nga lang is yung company na nasamahan mo is hindi maganda yung performance. Kaya, through time, ang laging nangyayari is nagkakaroon ng losses. So, sa madaling salita, pababa ng pababa yung investment account mo. Na po pwedeng maging value ng investment mo ay 0. So, what will happen? Anong accounting ang gagawin natin for that? If an investor share of losses of an associate equal or exceed its interest in the associate, the investor discontinued recognizing its share of a further losses. So kapag si investor, yung share of losses niya sa associate is nag-equal or nag-exceed na sa kanyang interest in the associate, the investor discontinued recognizing its share to further losses. Pero may exception. Kapag si investor, nag-incur siya ng legal or constructive obligation or nagbayad siya on behalf of the associate. Doon, magre-recognize pa tayo ng additional losses. So, yung interest in the associate na sinasabi ko, it includes yung carrying amount ng investment in associate and yung share in other long-term interest, such as the long-term receivable, loans, and advances, and yung investment in preference share, excluding the trade and other long-term receivable with the adequate collateral. The share in loss of the associate is charged first to the balance of the investment in associate. Any excess loss will be charged to the other components of the interest in the associate. So sa pag-charge naman ng losses sa interest in the associate is kapag nagkaroon ka na ng loss, una, i-charge na natin sa carrying amount ng investment. Tapos kung na-zero na yung investment mo, is any excess loss is i-charge na natin siya sa other component ng interest in the associate. So if the associate subsequently report profit, the investor resumes recognizing its share of those profit only after its share of the profit equal the share of the losses not recognized. So to illustrate, let's proceed to the illustration. Illustration, share in losses of associate. ABC Corporation owns 20% of the ordinary shares of XYZ The records of the ABC as of December 31, 20X1 show the following information before any unnecessary year-end adjustment. Investment in associate, 200,000. Trade accounts receivable, 300,000. Investment in preference share, 100,000. Advances to associate, 50,000. Loans receivable secured, 120,000. XYZ report loss of 1,400,000 in 20X1. So before we recognize the loss, first we are going to compute the interest in the associate. Yung interest in the associate na sinasabi ko is yan lang yung nabanggit ko kanina. Na ang kasama lang dyan is yung carrying amount ng investment in associate at yung share in other long-term interest in the associate such as the long-term receivable, yung loans, advances, at yung investment in preference share. So, ang kasama lang dito para makompute yung interest in the associate natin is yung investment in associate na 200,000 at yung investment in preference share na 100,000 at yung advances to associate na 50,000. Yung loans receivable naman is hindi siya kasama because only long-term receivable na that are not secured ang kasama. So, yung interest in the associate natin, before the adjustment, December 31, 20X2 amounted to 350. So, yung 350,000 na yan is will be the threshold in determining the share in losses of the associate. So, once na ma-zero out na yung 350 na yan, is doon na tayo mag-i-stop na mag-recognize ng share in losses kay associate. And since na-compute na natin yung interest in the associate natin na 350, magre-recognize na tayo ng loss. XYZ reported loss of 1,400,000 in 20X1. So, yung loss na 1,400,000 is ang i-recognize lang ni investor na share niya is yung 1 million times the 20% of the percentage of share ni investor to get the share of the investor. So, yung 280,000 na yan is yan lang yung i-recognize ni investor. At sinabi ko na nga kanina na yung sa share of losses of associate is i-charge natin una sa investment in associate at yung in excess is sa other component na ng investment ay interest in the associate. So yung entry to record the loss, December 31, 20X1, debit share in loss of associate 280,000. Credit investment in associate 200,000 at yung excess sa credit investment in preference share na 80,000. So the balances of the relevant account, yung investment in associate natin is 0, yung investment in preference share is 20,000. Yung 100,000 nilas natin yung 80,000 na loss. And advances to associate 50,000. So, yung interest in the associate natin, after the adjustment, December 31, 20X1, yung 70,000 is yan na yung magiging remaining threshold natin for recognizing further losses. XYZ reported loss of 500,000 in 20X2. So, nung 20X2, nag-report si associate na 500,000 loss. So, yung share in loss of the associate will be 100,000. Computed as the 500,000 na loss ni associate times the 20% of the percentage of the share ni investor And since yung 100,000 is nag-exceed na sa 70,000 na threshold natin, thus only the 70,000 will be recognized as share in losses in the only the 70,000 will recognize the share in associate loss in 20x2. So yung excess na 30,000, yung excess na 30,000 is disclosed as the loss not recognized. And if the associate is subsequently report profit, i-recognize lang ni investor yung profit kapag yung share niya sa profit is nag-equal na yung amount sa kanyang losses not recognized. So yung entry to record the share in loss in December 31, 20x2, debit share in loss of associate na 70,000, credit investment in preference share na 20,000, credit in advances to associate na 50,000. So after nating gawin yung entry na yan, is yung interest in the associate natin is has a zero balance. So since zero na yung interest in the associate natin, dito na tayo mag-i-stop na mag-recognize ng share in loss kay associate. XYZ reported loss of 100,000 in 20x3. In addition, ABC incurred constructive obligation in favor of XYZ in the amount of 120,000 and made 80,000 payment on behalf of XYZ. So nung 20x3, si associate is nag-report siya ng loss na 100,000. So yung share in loss of the associate will be 20,000, computed as the 100,000 loss ni associate times the 20% of the percentage of ownership ni investor. And since yung si investor, yung interest in the associate natin is zero na, ngayon si investor will not recognize any share in the 100,000 loss. So yung 20,000 na share in loss will be disclosed as loss not recognized. So yung cumulative balance ng losses that are not recognized is 50,000. So yung 30,000 nung 20x2 at yung 30,000 nung 20x2 at yung 20,000 nung 20x3 for the total of 50,000 loss not recognized. So yung further losses that it can be recognized by the investor or the ABC company was the legal and constructive obligation and the payment made on behalf of the associate. So yung entry to record in December 31, 20x3, debit loss on associate 200,000, credit cash 80,000, credit liability incurred on behalf of the associate 120,000. In 20x4, XYZ report profit of 1 million. So, nung 20x4, si XYZ or si associate, nag-report siya ng profit na 1 million. So, yung share in profit ni associate will be 200,000. Computed as the 1 million na profit ni associate times the 20% of the ownership of the investor. And since yung share of profit na 200 is nag-exceed na siya doon sa cumulative share of losses na recognize natin na 50,000, thus yung investor will now recognize the profit. So yung entry to record the profit in December 31, 20X4, debit advances to associate 50,000, debit investment in preference share 100,000, credit share in profit of associate na 150,000. So the next topic would be the impairment losses. So kapag sinabi nating impairment, meaning bumababa na yung value ng investment mo. So ngayon, how do we recognize and compute for the impairment? So to record the impairment, the entry would be a debit to impairment loss, credit investment in associate. Since ito din ay kabawasan sa ating investment account. But how can we say the investment was impaired? PAS 39 was applied to determine whether it is necessary to recognize any additional impairment loss with respect to its net investment in associate. If impairment is indicated, the amount is calculated by PAS 36 impairment of asset for impairment by comparing the investment recoverable amount with its carrying amount. The impairment loss recognized is not allocated to any asset, even to goodwill, which form part of the carrying amount of the investment in associate. Instead, a decrease in the carrying amount of the investment to which the goodwill is included. So, to determine whether an investment was impaired, we have to compare the carrying amount of investment to the recoverable amount. When we say recoverable amount, it refers to the present value of the expected cash flow that arise from the sale or the use of an asset. So meaning, yun na lang yung magiging value niya ngayon kung sakaling binenta or ginamit mo siya. At kung sakaling mas mababa naman yung recoverable amount natin compare sa carrying amount, ibig sabihin it is impaired. Kasi nga, imagine, yung nirecord mo sa carrying amount ng investment mo is mababa na pala sa mare-recover mo. Kung kaya't, impaired na yung asset, that's why kailangan natin bawasan ang investment account. Pero what if naman kung mas mataas yung recoverable amount kesa sa carrying amount? So, we will simply ignore kasi nga hindi naman siya naka-fair value. And so, under ng recoverable amount, there's a two option. Una, yung fair value less cost to sell, meaning yan yung mare-recover mong amount kapag benenta mo yung asset. Siyempre, ililess mo yung cost na na-incur mo nung binenta mo yung asset. Yung isa naman sa value in use is ito naman yung mare-recover mong amount kung sakaling ginamit mo yung asset. And syempre, pipiliin mo whichever is higher. So to illustrate, impairment of investment in associate. ABC Corporation owns 40% of the ordinary shares of XYZ. The investment in associate account has a carrying amount of 1 million on December 31, 20X1. ABC assessed that the investment may be impaired after impairment testing. ABC determined the following. Fair value less cost of disposal, 800,000. A value in use of the investment, 790,000. So to compute the impairment loss, the carrying amount of the investment of 1 million compared to the recoverable amount, whichever is higher of the fair value less cost of disposal na 800 and yung value in use na 790,000. So yung 800 na fair value less cost of disposal, ililess natin siya sa 1 million na carrying amount ng investment for the total of 200,000 na impairment loss. So yung entry to record the impairment loss in December 31, 20X1, debit impairment loss, 200,000 credit investment in associate na 200,000. And that will be the end of my reporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kara. Before we go to the summary and end our report, I'd like to mention that there are no disclosures specified in this standard. Instead, TFRS 12, Disclosure of Interest in Other Entities, outlines the disclosure required for entities with the joint control of or significant influence over an investee. So here is the summary po. Pwedeng tayo na po ang magbasa nito on our own. So this ends our report. Thank you for listening.